You're listening to Inside Israel Today with Gil Hoffman on the Land of Israel Network.
Hello and welcome to Inside Israel Today on the Land of Israel Network, on the landofisrael.com, on another Tuesday in this exciting election for the Knesset. And I say exciting election, but I do have to take that with a grain of salt. I don't entirely mean it. And I want to explain to my listeners why I'm not actually calling this an exciting election as I normally would. The answer is because I don't want to downplay the real exciting election that is already being worked on right now. And that election is not taking place on April 9th. That election is going to be taking place presumably sometime in 2020. That's going to be the election after Netanyahu has to quit. The criminal investigations of Netanyahu will inevitably bring him down. I know we've got a lot of people on the, listening to the Land of Israel Network who worship Netanyahu, and that's well deserved. The man has done so much for our country in his 13 years as prime minister and deserves all the acclaim. The current state of our economy being very positive, the current security situation being very positive, the diplomatic situation perhaps being better than ever. Netanyahu has to be given full credit for it. But all good things must end, and we have to be getting used to the fact that he can't stay prime minister forever. We will have a prime minister afterward who will be less experienced and less accomplished, and that's okay. So that election to replace Netanyahu, whenever it happens, though my money's on 2020, is going to be the exciting race. The race where everyone who's been waiting because they knew that they didn't want to waste money and effort on a lost cause is going to run. That's true in Netanyahu's Likud. That's true among politicians who are not yet in Netanyahu's Likud. And that's true with Netanyahu's political opponents. That's why I advise you, listeners to this show, to watch the moves that are being made by the politicians in the weeks ahead and understand that they are being made not for the current election. They are being made to position themselves for the more important election of 2020. I'll give you some examples. First of all, Ayelet Shaked and Naftali Bennett. Why would they leave a comfortable role as leaders of the Bayit Yehudi party, a party that's been around for 100 years, and leave to some party no one's ever heard of, have to build up a new name, a new brand in 3 months? Why would they make such a decision? They could probably do better if they have a storied history party with an infrastructure behind them, with activists working all over the country on their behalf. The answer is they're not really running in this election. They are. But this isn't the election that matters to them. The new right party, as it's being called, is a stopover on the way to the party that they want to head, which is the Likud. Right now, they cannot join Likud. There's great animosity between Sarah Netanyahu and Ayelet and Naftali. Even if the prime minister could be persuaded to take them in right now for rational, professional reasons, his wife isn't known for being rational or professional. She has a terrible grudge against them. She doesn't even let Ayelet Shaked fly in the same plane as her husband. She's not going to let her in his party. But the moment that the Netanyahus are gone, then they will join the Likud, and Naftali will run for leader of Likud and lose. And then the next election after that, Ayelet will run for leader of Likud and very well might win. But they can't join yet. So they're running in another party that no one's going to remember in history in the April election. And then that party will be gone. And when Netanyahu leaves, they will join the Likud. And so this election doesn't really matter. The next one matters a lot. Benny Gantz, okay, former chief of staff of the IDF, didn't really intend to speak yet, but yesterday a group of Druze officers came to his home in Rosh Ha'ayin and talked to him about the nation-state law. And so he had to say that he wants the nation-state law to be changed in order to help the Druze people, and that's very nice. He also is being careful because he's running for the election of 2020. Let me explain. The reason why he can't say anything yet, and the reason why he can't build his list yet, why he's purposely delaying both, is because the following two jobs are both acceptable to him: defense minister under Netanyahu and opposition leader to Netanyahu. People like Yair Lapid and Moshe Bogi Ya'alon are telling Gantz, we won't join you if you're going to be Netanyahu's defense minister. We want to replace Netanyahu. It can't be done right now, but we want to replace Netanyahu. We won't join his government. And he's not willing to say that. Then there are also people who are not yet in politics but are considering entering politics who would run on Gantz's slate, but they want to be cabinet ministers. They're telling him, we don't want to join you if you're going to be the head of the opposition. Then we'll just be backbench opposition MKs who can't really accomplish anything. We only want to join you if you're going to be joining the cabinet. You can be the defense minister, and we'll be other ministers. Maybe we'll be in the security cabinet along with you, deciding whether we go to war or make peace. But Benny Gantz can't tell people on this side or on that side what he's going to do, because both options are acceptable to him, because both options, defense minister and opposition leader, will allow him to be in a good place to run for prime minister in the more important, exciting election in 2020. So, one more person as an example, Danny Danon. Danny Danon is our ambassador to the UN for another month or so. He only had to leave about a month early to participate in the Likud primary on the 5th of February. Why did he decide for that 1 month to stay as ambassador to the UN after he's been working on his political comeback the entire time while he's been at the UN? He's been constantly informing the Likud Central Committee members what he's doing. He's been very successful over there. He's been making sure that people know about that. The answer is, he is running. He's just not running yet. He's sitting out this election that doesn't really matter in April in order to run in the election that really does matter for leader of Likud in the election of 2020. Okay, one more. The Labour Party. The Labour Party is self-destructing, imploding and everything. Some members of Knesset are purposely going with the flow in Labour, not really making a fuss. A couple members of Knesset, Eitan Kabel and Ayelet Nechemias Verbin, are taking a great political risk by purposely publicly insulting Avi Gabay. Why can they get away with that? Well, that doesn't seem like a smart thing to do, to insult their party leader. The answer is, fine, they won't make it to the next Knesset. But the one after that, maybe they will. Then the Labour Party will have a new leader who doesn't mind so much that they insulted his predecessor. It's not too bad to take a break for only about a year. It's not that big a deal. So everybody is running for the election of 2020, except for Netanyahu himself. Netanyahu himself is running in this election, and he's decided to run against the legal establishment because he thinks that that is what will help his election campaign, to downplay all the investigations against him, to rile up his political base against the legal establishment, make this race be about him and him being innocent and the investigations being pathetic. I don't know if this is the right thing or the wrong thing. I personally think it might be more wrong than right. If I were him, I would focus more on his diplomatic security and economic successes. But maybe he doesn't have a choice. Maybe since his political opponents are going to be focused on the indictment pending a hearing that's going to be coming next month, he needs to be working already in advance to make soften the blow of that indictment pending a hearing, so that when the people hear about it, they'll basically mock and scorn at it. And then maybe people will forget about it right before the election, and then he can focus on diplomacy, security, economy. After all, shortly before the election, he's going to be going to Washington to meet with the President of the United States. He has an AIPAC conference that will make him look very good. And maybe that is Netanyahu's long-term strategy during this campaign, because he is the one focusing on this campaign. The second thing that I wanted to focus on in this election is to lament that two of Israel's most historic parties seem to be going down the drain. The first party is the Labour Party. Avi Gabay is the leader of the party, who's a man in the wrong place at the wrong time. He's a self-made millionaire, very impressive in what he's accomplished in his life, and yet he doesn't seem to have the people skills to run a party, or really the ideology. His ideology has gone back and forth and back and forth. Tonight I'm going to be attending, or at least covering, an event where he's going to be unveiling his diplomatic plan, and chances are it'll be different than other statements that he's made since entering politics. He talked about how, at one point, about how settlements don't have to be evacuated. At one point, he talked about how the left might have forgotten its Jewish values. Chances are he's not going to be saying either of those things tonight. And the Labour Party has survived bad leaders before, but this is going to be very, very bad. Most of their voters now, what they care about most is replacing Netanyahu, and they know that Avi Gabay is the last person who can do it. And so they're going to vote for other parties that have a better chance of doing it. The Labour Party in the April 9th election is going to be going back to its base core of people that have never voted for anything other than the Labour Party, and no matter what they do and no matter how bad their leadership is, just can't bring themselves to vote for any other party. I expect their electorate to be an average age somewhere in the late 60s. And that does not bode well for a party that wants to survive. But perhaps next time they'll have a younger leader, and they'll have a leadership race that ends in a better way, and maybe the Labour Party will come back to life. The other party that's on its way out is the National Religious Party, which ran in the last couple elections under the name Bayit Yehudi. But this is the party that goes back before the founding of the state. I said 100 years, I don't know about that earlier in the show, but it has been around for several decades. My parents were members of, not members of the party, but were the institutions that the party formed when they were growing up in Bnei Akiva. My grandparents were brought to this country by World Mizrahi. That's part of that same overarching religious Zionist institution that the National Religious Party grew out of. And Ayelet Shaked and Naftali Bennett leaving the party certainly hurt it. And we don't know yet who's going to be leading the party. There's going to be decisions made on that over the next few days. Yesterday, its satellite party, the National Union, decided to elect a new younger leader, Bezalel Smotrich, as its leader, and he's going to say, I want to lead the joint list that there'll be of the National Union and the Bayit Yehudi parties. And that would mean that Bayit Yehudi wouldn't be running even as the head of a party in the election, which would be a historic landmark of one of the parties that founded the state basically dying. There are those who say that that's a good thing, that the religious Zionists have integrated into the Likud, into the ruling party, and religious Zionists who are not as right-wing have integrated into other parties. Yesh Atid will purposely be running with a third of its slate being national religious, perhaps. There'll be other parties who try to get that vote. And so maybe it's a sign that religious Zionists, modern Orthodox people, have successfully integrated into the country. And the last political topic that I wanted to talk about. You know what? Maybe we'll do that after the break. We'll talk more about this election after our break. Stay with us.
Theater and Theology. Tune in for an interview with Yael Valier, director of the Jerusalem-based theater company.
Which is one of the reasons I prefer to do my plays at the Khan, which, by the way, was built over 1,000 years ago. In the Crusader period, you know that because you're a tour guide. I just love doing shows there. It feels so good.
Listen to the full show on Rejuvenation with Eve Harrow every Sunday on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com.
And we're back here on the Land of Israel Network on the landofisrael.com. This is Inside Israel Today. And the second half of the show, I encourage our listeners to read an article that I wrote about the English speakers in this country and whether they could ever organize to support the same candidates for Knesset, whether English speakers in Israel could be galvanized as a force. I wrote in the article about how there are 250,000 people who were born in 7 English-speaking countries who are living in Israel today. Now, some of them made Aliyah in the 1950s, but most of them are people who still speak English in their private lives while living here. And they have a lot in common. They have a lot of the same concerns about about how to succeed and thrive in this country, how to raise children in this country, how to work in this country. 250,000 is a lot of people, and that's not counting their children and grandchildren whose mother tongue is also English. It's more than the amount of votes that Shas got in the 2015 election, which the party won 7 seats in that election. Could you imagine if there were 7 seats of English speakers in Israel in the Knesset? Now, I'm not saying form a party of them, but the question is whether they can work together more than they have in the past, if a party would make a more serious effort. And I spoke about it for the article to a lot of different people, to the 3 Knesset members that we've had who are born in the United States over the last decade, Dov Lipman from Yesh Atid, Yehuda Glick from Likud, and Michael Oren from Kulanu. And I spoke to Carolyn Glick, who is running in the new right party of Ayelet Shaked and Naftali Bennett. And got interesting responses, but there was basically a consensus that because there's such a variety among English speakers, that they're never really going to be able to run in any kind of organized way in order to help their population. Now, I did go to an event a couple days ago of Yair Lapid speaking in English in Tel Aviv, and on the one hand, it was nice to see 500 English speakers come out to an event to hear a politician speak in English. On the other hand, when he was asked questions about helping the English-speaking community in particular, he didn't really have answers. He was ready, because he speaks beautiful English, to give the answers that he would give to a Hebrew audience in English, on security and on matters of religion and state, on Netanyahu, on how to replace Netanyahu, on the fate of the centrist parties that are not uniting right now. It's good that he could answer those questions in English and everything, but when a young lady in the back asked a question about how she could even survive living in Yerucham, making Aliyah from North Carolina, and all the challenges that she's been through, Lapid thanked her, congratulated her for making Aliyah, said that she's the epitome of Zionism, and gave a lot of nice compliments, but then didn't really answer her question. He said, I'll help you join the Yerucham branch of my party, and then you'll have a better social life. What? No, this woman needs to know how to get a job. This woman needs to know how to be able to support herself. This woman needs to have help dealing with bureaucracy. She's asked the leader of a party, a man who's running for prime minister, and he didn't really have an answer ready. And perhaps if his party had an Anglo representative, and I'm not getting into why, but Dov Lipman's not running in the party like he did in the past, perhaps he would be better in a position to answer that question. We don't know yet officially. There was lists of candidates are only going to be submitted in the third week of February. But I've seen that if you want to take care of your community, you really have to do it yourself. So right now, the only candidate running who is from an English-speaking country, other than Yehuda Glick, who I don't think really has too much of a chance in the Likud primary of getting reelected, is Carolyn Glick, my former colleague at the Jerusalem Post. And it's interesting to see the response that she sent me when I asked her about whether there's an organized Anglo vote in Israel, and if so, how large and how many mandates can it be worth for a party. I was actually surprised that she gave me a long answer because we've been told that she's not interviewing yet. She wrote me, native English-speaking Israelis, otherwise known as Anglos, are certainly not homogeneous in their outlooks. She went to Harvard, ladies and gentlemen. For instance, they run the gamut of the religious secular spectrum, although more often than not they're found in the middle. At the same time, they're highly educated and share certain core ideals and concerns. First, the overwhelming majority of Anglo-Israelis are deeply Zionist. They made Aliyah because of their commitment to Zionism. Not surprisingly, given their high motivation and education levels, the contribution that English-speaking Israelis have made in every facet of Israeli society is simply extraordinary. In part because so many English-speaking Israelis have family abroad, they are keenly concerned about how Israel is portrayed in the international media. They are disproportionately engaged in Hasbara efforts to defend Israel from its many detractors abroad, particularly in the Western world. English-speaking Israelis are also disproportionately concerned about the trajectory of the American Jewish community, particularly in relation to assimilation and the attendant weakening of Jewish identity. English speakers in Israel also have practical concerns in relation to taxation of foreign income, pensions and wealth, in relation to integration and absorption assistance, and English language instruction in schools. Okay, I want to stop there for a moment. That last sentence is extremely important, that there be a member of Knesset, regardless of political views on the traditional right-wing, left-wing spectrum in Israel. We have someone who is coming to the Knesset with a purpose of dealing with these practical concerns about taxations, pension, absorption, integration, English language instruction in schools. Beautiful. So that was a very positive sign. But here comes the negative, ladies and gentlemen. You know, Carolyn, she had to add a dig here. When you consider that second-generation Israelis from Anglo-Israeli families retain their hyphenated identity, this is a significant electoral demographic. It's long past time that its members receive adequate and competent representation in the Knesset. What? You had to add this line that Yehuda Glick, Michael Oren, and Dov Lipman have not given this demographic adequate and competent representation in the Knesset? Okay, Carolyn, Michael Oren, 99% sure, is not running for Knesset again, except if a party comes in and sweeps him off his feet. Yehuda Glick has a Likud primary on the 5th of February that is going to be an absolute bloodbath politically. And Dov Lipman had a personal dispute that I won't get into in Yesh Atid that's going to prevent him from running. What is the point of stepping on these people? These are people who tried to help English speakers, certainly tried more than anybody has before, who knew the responsibility that they had coming into the Knesset, and day in and day out had on their mind that their goal is going to be to help English speakers in Israel. They had the limitations. None of them became a minister. We would, during their tenure in the Knesset, the absorption minister was Russian most of the time. That's kind of limiting. The interior minister was ultra-Orthodox during that time. That's also kind of limiting in helping. But they did their best. They tried to help people in a way that I think we have to really be grateful. And so this is Carolyn. Out of all people, you'd think Carolyn would start on the right foot. And here, just want to raise this possibility that maybe she needs to start off with just a little bit more humility. That couldn't hurt anyone, even a politician. So this has been Inside Israel Today, here on the Land of Israel Network, on thelandofisrael.com. We'll have another exciting show from Jerusalem next week. Looking forward. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You're listening to the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com, broadcasting the truth and beauty of Israel to the